So I am excited to introduce actually both doctors, Dr. Leo and Dr. Ian. Probably too smart for all of us here, but good to have both of them here. I've known Leo for many years now. In previous life as a customer, just as a good person to talk about lots of things in business. And I think the concept that he's always brought to the party is clarity about how to think about data and customers and really apply for things like pricing and other things. So, we talked about different things you can control over time. And I reached out to Leo saying, Leo, can you talk about pricing? Because this is very relevant given everything going on around us with inflation. We're all eating price increases from suppliers. We need to pass it along. He said, sure, would you mind if I bring my colleague Ian along? I said, absolutely, the more the merrier. And so without further ado, Ian and Leo, over to you. I'm going to let you guys give a 30-second intro on yourself. And like I said, do justice to your background. But that'll be great to have you kick off the presentation, Leo. Thank you very much. And over to you.
Thanks. And can you hear me okay?
Very well, yes.
Okay, good. Leo?
Leo, I think you might be on mute, Leo, if you don't mind unmuting and go ahead and start. Yep. Okay. Leo's having technical difficulties.
Yeah, okay. Maybe
You can go ahead and start, Ian, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll start. Leo?
Are we there? No, I'm sorry. Are we
there? There you are.
Okay,
yep,
sorry.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
all right, Leo, you kick it off, Leo, and then I'll pick it up.
All right. Sorry, when I shared my screen, I actually hit mute. So Ian and I will kind of split this presentation, and like I say, we have actually included some appendix slides for further clarity as you get the presentation. But basically, we want to talk about in these challenging times, how do you improve your pricing fitness? And so a little bit about my background. I didn't put it on the slide here, but I actually started out in industry. I worked for Beard Pole and Weed Eater. We actually developed the first weed eater when I was there, and we also developed the first leaf blower when I was there. So started out with that. Then I went and helped build railroad tank cars and cogeneration equipment. And then I moved into the life science area where I've worked for a number of years in a number of different areas. So a little bit of my background, I've been in this industry for almost 40 years. Pricing since 2001, and in fact, I think I met Ian in 2002 doing pricing. So that's my background briefly, and this is Ian. I'll turn it over to you and let you get started.
Yeah, thanks, Leo. Yeah, I started my life as a physicist and did research for a while, and then got into the business world through McKinsey. But the relevant part of my experience here, I think, is in pricing, where I actually, Leo was my very first customer, basically, in my pricing world. So he got to see me when I didn't know a whole lot, but still we managed to get through it. And yeah, since then I've been doing pricing in different roles as a consultant, working with big companies like Medtronic and Syngenta. And more recently, I've started working a lot with smaller companies. So I find it super interesting to do innovation pricing, but also do pricing in basically all sorts of different angles. And after 20 years, hopefully we can help you not make some of the mistakes that we've made over the years. So Leo, I guess you'll drive the slides, right? So if you could go to the next slide. Yeah. So first point, and I think the union of prices makes us talk about this, right? Is that pricing is the biggest profit lever that you can have. So if you can improve your prices by 1%, then looking at a quote average company close work, then that could increase their profits by 12%. Impacting variable costs, volume, or fixed costs has much less effect because it doesn't affect the whole of your revenue. So pricing has a hugely important lever, and yet it doesn't tend to get the attention that some of these other areas do for a variety of different reasons we won't go into today. But pricing has a huge impact, and I think it's fair to say most companies underinvest in their capabilities in this area. So our assertion on the next slide is that organizations, especially in these times when we've got inflation and uncertainty, you need to work on your pricing fitness, sort of taking a gym analogy on this thing, right? So one can think of physical fitness being about strength, flexibility, and stamina. I'm turning 60 in a couple of months, and it's increasingly important that we try and maintain these things. And I think the analogous capabilities in pricing is strength is around infrastructure and processes to robustly manage prices. Patrick was just talking about basically the same thing in the services space, so you can deliver their services in a very certain way, sustainable way. Flexibility, I think of it as the ability to act quickly to changing market conditions. This is something that some of us have sort of haven't done enough flexibility training, but now inflation and the supply shortages is really, we're starting to strain that aspect of things, and we need to build up that flexibility capability. And then stamina is a sort of always on pricing alerts and reaction mechanisms. So it's about making sure we're always ready to address pricing opportunities and pricing threats. It's part of our standard way of doing business. It's not just something we do once every now and then. So given all that, what we thought on the next slide is we were trying to think about what you could do today, because inflation is raging away and doesn't show much sign of abating very quickly. So we've got a couple of slides on each of these. We'll try and get through them pretty quickly. But the first one is increasing list prices at the top end of the range, and then using discounts and promotions if you need to. So explain why we take that approach, right? It feels pretty aggressive somehow. It can feel sort of pushy. Maybe you raise this price more than you need to, but we think this approach gives you a lot more flexibility, and yeah, talk about it in a second. Second one is around minimizing traps in your commercial policies. There may be terms and conditions lurking in your contracts that need to be you need to be aware of, that really never triggered before and now have a much higher chance. The third one is segmenting your products and really focus where you can win and minimize the damage elsewhere. We see lots of companies who they focus on the problem products, if you will, and then they don't spend time on the areas where they could actually do more, even though they're, quote, not problem areas. And then finally, training and guiding your sales team on value and behavioral pricing. These are things that can be done relatively quickly, and these can all have a measurable and very interesting impact on your results. So before we get to those details, just taking a step back on the value, right? So when you're selling to a customer, they are going to buy based on the value that they get, so trade it off against the risk that your offer might deliver, and then how long it takes them to get the value. There's particularly important risk and time when we're talking about innovative solutions, but it's true in general, right? Now, price, that's how you capture a share of the value that you have created through your service, right? But interestingly, you're also, what you're thinking about, what the customer's thinking about, there's very much a yin-yang aspect to this, right? There's a certain amount of risk, and how much of it you're going to take, how much of it the customer is going to take. Are they going to pay you upfront for their service, or are they going to pay you as they get the value over time? So work to increase the size of the value pie. That's always very important. But then you've got decisions to make about where you put the risk and where you put the time. And what I think we're finding today, as we go to the next slide, is that risk equation is changing, right? So now we've got things that higher costs on the supplier side are causing us stress, but we've also got supply issues, right? So now all of a sudden getting the lowest cost supply, some companies are being burned because it turns out that low cost supply is maybe not so available when they need it. So there's a different set of concerns on the supplier side, but on the customer side, there's also a different set of concerns. So now availability of inputs starts to be a big deal. Being able to buy the supplies they need and is sometimes more important than the cost of them. I've done a lot of work in the agricultural space, and in Europe, agriculture has been hit very hard by the Ukrainian war. Big swaths of growing land have gone away. Certain products were in overabundance, certain other products were unavailable. China had all sorts of problems last year that caused supply chain issues as well. So oftentimes now it was, certain products need to be available and they'll pay anything for them because they're just critical to getting produce on the farm. In other cases, the cost of the inputs is then a problem as well. Now, also, and customers have prices are going up as well. So bottom line is, stuff is not happening in a smeared out average way. So you need the flexibility and the agility right? To be able to assess how things have changed, and also in the stamina, in a sense, if I keep going back to my fitness analogy, to be able to keep doing that in an ongoing way and not just sort of wearing the team out as you do it. So now let's get back to our sort of tactics for how we would do this, right? So we talked about increasing prices for list prices first, right? So list price, this is a sort of a mini price waterfall. Hopefully you're familiar with that, right? The price waterfall takes you from list price to invoice price to net price. And net price is closest to how much you actually get paid for what you deliver, right? And then you have discounts and rebates that are incentives, are part of your commercial policy to help drive, that help get you down to net price. So as you are thinking about perhaps doing a price increase, you've got two options really at the highest level. You could raise your list prices, or you could reduce your discounts and rebates. So what we propose, and we learn this working with companies in very unstable markets, right? This was a lesson I learned myself working with in Ukraine, not this year, and Turkey in the past, both highly volatile markets, lots of political uncertainty, market uncertainty, exchange rate uncertainty. They would raise their prices more than they thought, and they would communicate that ahead of time before doing it and explain it. And Patrick again was talking about the communication. They would over communicate these things, and then they would use the discount and rebate to make adjustments back down if and when that was needed. And that had the benefit of this is that so it's a little painful up front, right? But it shows your commitment to maintaining a healthy market to your competition, and it also then if you've said you go up with a 15% list price increase, then when you end up backing off a little bit and coming down to 12%, that feels like a little bit of a win for the customer, right? And it's easier to adjust discounts and rebates. You can do it more in a more pointed, more targeted way than you can list prices. So it gives you that flexibility to react. So it feels painful up front, but it really gives you some opportunities on the back end to be more agile with your price reductions. Happy to, when we get to the Q&A, if you violently disagree with us, let us know, right? Feel free to put it in the chat. If you've got experiences where that works, feel free to put that in the Q&A as well. We'd love to hear those experiences, but this is something we found that works. The second area I mentioned was the reviewing the commercial policy for traps, right? So the steps here I think are pretty straightforward. So basically just pull out all those contracts and look at them for traps and then see what you can do about them, ideally before the season starts. But if that's before your contract season starts, if you have a seasonal aspect, or just before the contract starts, but any time is better to be aware of these things than any other time. And in some cases, you may need to adjust your product allocations and discretionary discounts to minimize the impact. So some of the common types of traps that one sees are being able to unraise prices during the contract period, right? Or hopefully you haven't written those contracts, but there's a lot of them out there. Sometimes you may have contracts that allow you to increase prices if the consumer price index or some other producer price index has gone up by a certain amount. You want to know what those numbers are, and mostly you probably ignored them, but now it's super important you know what they are, because you may want to go exercise on those things, right? You may be able to react sooner than before the contract ends if those are built in, right? So sometimes traps can be opportunities. Fixed discounts during the contract period can be a challenge, or rebates that the payment required if supply causes the customer to miss their volume rebate threshold, right? So again, when there's no supply issues, these are not an issue. But if it is, then you really want to know about it. Forewarned is forearmed with these things, right? And then one last slide, and then I'll hand over to Leo. On the third area, this is the idea of thinking about, again, this is sort of agility related, right? This is thinking about how you're going to handle different products based on the product segmentation. Now, one could spend a long time and do very complex product segmentations, but a very straightforward and simple one, and easy to execute one, and easy to explain and easy to be understood by the sales teams is around having a product differentiation based on the product margin, which you will know, And then the product differentiation in the market, right? So is it more commodity or is it highly differentiated or somewhere in the middle? So your highly differentiated, generally very profitable products, these will be your strong pull products, right? Customers will go looking for these products. These are very high value. And these are the ones where generally will be least affected by what's going on in the market. You want to understand if your values change today, but generally these are the ones where you're going to have the least problem, but also may also give you the best opportunity to increase prices, right? So these tend to get overlooked from a raising price perspective because they are not problem children. So hopefully you've been working that and pushing the envelope, but that's not always the case. Secondly, the push products. So these are still generally profitable products, but these are not so differentiated, right? And I'm always quite surprised how many of these there are in some of my clients' portfolios. So these push products, these are more competitively priced. This is where, if you're selling through a distribution channel, this is where you can incentivize the channel to push your product, to position your product versus the competitor's product, right? So these cases, you want to really, you need to be very focused here and very clearly understanding what's going on with the competition. Where are my competitors struggling? Where are they doing okay relative to me? Therefore, what do I want to do, right? This is the sort of B area. And then, yeah, as I said, mentioned, incentivizing the channel to on these products is super helpful. And then the C products, these are your low margin, more commodity products in general. In these cases, generally you want to compete, you don't want to spend too much time on these because there's only so much you can do. You really don't have a lot of price leverage or discount leverage here because they just don't make enough money. So you want to try and stay very close to the market. If you're pricing just above the competition, just below, you want to really be careful to maintain that and keep going. And you want to understand how your costs have changed. And if you can get some hints on it, how your competitors' costs have changed. I think the global environment now with different inflation rates and particularly different exchange rates means that competitors for some regions are struggling more than others and are more likely to be trying to raise prices than others, and in other areas not so much. So having forewarned is forearmed on that, having a sense of what's going on in the market, even if it just a sort of a fairly granular, high level, granular level can be super helpful. So focus on the products where you can make a difference, right? And then just grit your teeth and deal with it in the other areas where literally you just have to follow the competition, the market. So yeah, let me now hand over the fourth point and the sort of overall closing part. So Leo will handle those. I'll shut up.
All right, thank you, Ian. So Ian has given you three basic areas where you can improve pricing today. Kind of where we come in, we help you do that. So raise list price, anybody can do that. Any finance person will tell you what to do. Where a pricing person comes in is how much you raise and in what products you raise them. Segment products, same thing. We can help segment those products. So we've laid it out very simply, and you as a practitioner can do these things yourself. We can help you do them maybe a little bit more effectively. The part that most people struggle with is training sales to promote the value. And there's basically 5 areas that we look at, 5 categories of that customers look at value. And I'm going to kind of go to my favorite one, the indirect value piece. A couple of years ago, I was working with a sales manager and a sales rep that had a big customer. They actually sold several $100,000 of chemicals, both laboratory grade chemicals as well as industrial grade chemicals to this customer, but we're only getting about 30 or 40% of the business. Both the sales manager and the sales rep had worked at that particular company at this point, and then had come to work for my company. So they had good relationships with people all throughout the plant, but just weren't getting the business. And they asked me to come talk to the senior vice president of procurement to help out. And I asked, what value do we have here at this plant? They said, well, we know everybody, we know everything, we know what they do. I'm an expert in this company because I worked here for a number of years. And they told me about their day-to-day activities, that typically on Mondays, the sales rep goes to the plant, goes to the warehouse to see what products have come in on Friday and Saturday. If there's anything that was ordered incorrectly, she would take care of that. If there's anything that was broken, she would send it back so the customer didn't have to do it. On Tuesdays, made a tour around the plant to all the various parts that ordered from them. She had given them all whiteboards, and they would write down what they needed, and she would fill out the requisitions forms, since she did that before, and take them to the lab manager or the division manager for approval, and then take them over to purchasing to place the orders. And so I said, that's great. We met with the purchasing vice president. He said, look, I love your company. I love your product. Your prices are too high. And this is one of the things that Ian and I both focus a lot on, teaching sales reps how to answer this question: your price is too high. And that's the first words out of the purchasing vice president's mouth: your price is too high. I said, well, we can fix that for you if you like. He said, well, I'd like that. I said, well, why don't you tell me where you'd like the prices to be, and we'll see if we can come to an agreement. So he told me the prices, and I said, I can meet most of those prices. He said, that'd be great. He said, when? I said, I can do it this afternoon. The price will be in the system when you wake up tomorrow morning. He said, that's great. I'll start shifting most of my business to you if that's true. When I wake up in the morning, my prices are there. I said, that's perfect. The manager and the sales rep were sweating tremendously because they didn't know what was going on. I said, but by the way, for these prices, there's some other services we can't offer anymore. Well, like what? And I went through all the things that the sales rep did for the customer. He goes, well, then we're gonna have to hire 2 or 3 people to do all that. I said, well, that's a whole different issue, and we're saving you the money on your product. Long story short, he realized that the value we were providing, this indirect value, was worth more than a couple of pennies on the chemicals that he was buying. So we got the business. So the thing here is there's a number of parts of value that we need to look at. We need to train our salespeople, our customer service people, how to promote our value to the customers in all these areas and react to how that question, your price is too high. So we look at behavioral pricing tactics, and we look at strong references and weak references, and there's helpful price anchors and unhelpful price anchors. And so as this slide develops, you see those. Indirect alternatives is a great one. Ian likes to talk about the next best alternative. You know, what else could they buy instead of your product? So we help salespeople understand how people react to competition, how they react to value, how they react to these next best alternatives, and give them answers to the basic pricing questions. Why should I buy from you? You know, are your prices too high? So here's an example, real world example, again, of a sales team that went through training. We did a pricing exercise. I gave 3 sales reps. There's actually about 50 people that were in this program. And we did a training. We did a 6-month pricing campaign, actually the back half of 2020, because we were trying to overcome some COVID issues. And we gave reps an option. You can participate fully, partially, or not at all. And so here's some 3 reps that participated. Sales rep number 1 fully participated, and you can see, his adoption rate. He acted on 35 actions. He got 7% more adoption from his customers than his peers did. The rep that didn't do as well only got 9%. He cherry picked the actions he wanted to take. But you could see just in general that the sales rep that fully participated, that went through the training, that utilized the value propositions, did better across the board than his peers. The sales rep in the middle that did, most of them did better than most of his peers, but not as well as the rep that did everything. And so, we go back to building pricing fitness. You start with your commercial strategy, and then, to echo Patrick Dell, communication. You communicate a lot what's going on with pricing in today's world, with inflation, with supply shortages, with the war in Ukraine, with fuel prices bouncing all around. It's highly important that you follow a policy of pricing fitness. And so again, summary: 4 things you can do today. You can increase your list price. You can look for traps in commercial policies. And by the way, this is another kind of quick example. I worked with a multinational company. Ian and I both have worked with companies around the globe. both of us have. And I worked for a multinational company. I took over one of their contracts in the United States, and it was very one-sided for the company. And they asked me to do some business with one of their subsidiaries in Asia Pacific. And when I wrote the contract, the pricing contract for them, the major or the home office came back to me and said, "Hey, this contract is unfair." And I said, "Really, what's unfair about it?" And they mentioned several of the traps that I had put in on the price agreement or on the contract. And I said, "Well, look, I pulled them right out of the contract you have with us." And they go, "Oh, well, it's not supposed to work that way." So as Ian mentioned, you want to be aware of the traps one way or the other, so that you can mitigate the problems that happen with that. So again, you want to focus on creating value and use price to capture, your fair share of that value. And again, these are relatively simple things to do. They're easy to implement, but you can run into a lot of problems if you don't communicate, as Patrick mentioned. As Nick mentioned, there's hundreds of small things that you can do, and all of them, help you get price. Ian and I like to talk about, our job is to help you pick up pennies, lots and lots and lots of pennies over and over and over again to get that recurring revenue. So what can you do to improve your prices? Plan for uncertainty, train, and focus on innovation. So if you like what you saw, or you have some questions, there's our email. Feel free to email us. Vivek also has some things that he'll send out. Again, we have an appendix with some additional information for you. Ian, before I hang up or say goodbye, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I thought it was interesting on the sales team exercise you did. I noticed that they all lost revenue, but some of them increased profits and some of them lost profits, right? So,
Yes.
it's a true statement. I think not many people recognize this, but you cannot be the maximum of your revenue is at a different price than the maximum of your profit. So, you cannot have, if somebody ever tells you to maximize revenue and profit at the same time, they're asking you to do something that can't be done. So to some extent, you need to choose which one you're going to do, right? So, obviously that's another topic for another day, but I think that's just sort of worth stating, right? And I guess the only other thing I'd say is, definitely work on the short-term stuff now, but if you haven't focused on pricing in the past, then you need to think about when and how you're going to get to that. Because just like going to the gym, you don't get your fitness back. One trip to the gym doesn't make you strong, flexible, and what's the third one? And give you stamina, right? You've got to work at it for a while. So there are things you can do in the short run, but you've really got to think about this for the long haul as well. And yeah, I guess that's all I need to say. Yep.
Okay,
Excellent.
thank you. And Vivek, I was sharing my screen, so I have not been able to see if there's any questions.
Yeah,
there's a couple of questions. Aaron's going to take them. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I have two quick questions that popped up. The first one, either one of you can answer this or both. Are there any drawbacks to increasing the price and then discounting?
Yeah, I said it, so maybe I'll try and defend it, right? Well, yeah, I mean, you certainly get more pushback up front, and I think you can have challenges if you raise it such a way. There's a danger that you raise the price and the competition doesn't follow, right? So there's a little bit of this is whether you are a price follower in the market or the price leader. If you're the price leader, then I think being bold, if you raise your prices a bit more, then and hopefully the competition will follow you. If not, you can discount, right? But staying close to customers, communicating, making sure concerns are recognized. These are the ways to mitigate these challenges. If you're not sure, then maybe you don't want to be so aggressive with your largest, most strategic customers to start with, but start with the smaller ones, right? And see how it goes. So segment the risk a little bit. But if you're going to raise prices, you're going to influence customers, and they're not going to love you for that part. So they better love you for everything else. But yeah, so hopefully that sort of answers the question at least. And yeah, go ahead.
That's great. Dr. Leo, did you have anything to add on top of that, or?
Yeah, so just real quick. So in today's age, you see a lot of customers come back and say, you can only increase list price once a year. And again, that's where the discounting and the promotions come into play. And I've actually increased list price a couple of times in 2019, 2020, and 2021, but then gone back to my best customers and I told them up front, as Patrick said, hey, I'm going to increase list price. You know, inflation is 8%. You're getting a 10% price increase, but I'm going to increase your discount, you know, by 2% to offset some of that. And again, communication is the key. And again, list price is a signaling event. And again, if you're a price follower, you're a little bit more careful than if you're a price leader. So you really have to understand what your competition is doing.
Yeah, totally agree.